Hi, gang. Donna here. Today I have the pleasure of sitting down with public relations agent Andrea Pass. She has her own firm called Andrea Pass Public Relations. However, her story starts with her dream to become the next Dan Rather. Her journey will take us from going for her dream to becoming the successful PR agent she is today. In between, we will talk about how close she got to sitting in that nightly news anchor chair and the choice she had to make by walking away. Welcome, Andrea. How are you doing today?
Hello, Donna. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, we were having fun already before we even started recording. So
We're ready
let's
to get together in person.
exactly. So let's talk about your journey. So when you were growing up, around what age did you decide you wanted to be a nightly news anchor?
Well, it was interesting because I always thought, okay, I'm going to study journalism and I'm going to go to UCLA, which I don't know why. I'm a girl from New Jersey, but it just sounded so, what a dream to go to UCLA. And then I fell in love with TV broadcasting. And I was addicted to Dan Rather, who was the CBS Evening News anchor at the time. And so I said, okay, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to major in communications, radio, TV, film. And then I'm going to come out. I'm going to go straight to CBS and I'm going to get a job. And that's what I did.
That's awesome because so many people never get that far. They have their dream and then they kind of dismiss it. So you get to CBS and
And I had to take a typing test. And these were the days, in the early 80s. I'm dating myself, but you can tell roughly what my age is. And women had to take a typing test. So there I was in my little navy blue suit with the shirt that had the tie sewn into the shirt,
yeah.
and my little navy blue pumps, and my briefcase with my initials that my parents bought me for college graduation. And I'm cool. I'm hot stuff. I'm going to CBS and I'm getting a job. And I have to take a typing test. Well, luckily, I typed about 97 words a minute, and there was a freeze in the broadcast area at CBS.
Oh no.
So there was a job opened in the magazine division because CBS owned magazines at the time, and they owned a magazine called Woman's Day Magazine that many people will still be familiar with. And I got a job being an administrative assistant in the advertising trafficking department. Well, I didn't want to be an administrative assistant, but I said, okay, here's my in. I will do this. Well, 5 weeks later, I get promoted in that department and I start doing advertising, trafficking, and layout. So I was actually getting all of the film for all of the ads and deciding what ad goes on what page of the magazine based on their contract and requirements and measurements and what have you. And, I stayed there for 3 years. I had great relationships, lovely people. But then I had that opportunity to interview for a PR position at the CBS radio division. Now the freeze has lifted. I'm going to go over to the CBS radio division and do PR because I always loved PR. I was the PR chair in high school and in college, and I took a few PR classes, but I had done public relations. So I really loved it. And I learned a lot at the CBS radio division, writing press releases, picking up the phone, pitching stories, arranging interviews, getting the clips, servicing the clips to the different divisions in radio, even having a chance to meet different celebrities who were coming for interviews.
Nice.
Side story, one of my favorite ones, two of my favorite ones, Cousin Brucey, who was terrific, great guy, and Mickey Dolenz from the Monkees, because I was always a Mickey Dolenz fan when everyone back in those days loved Davy Jones.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, and Neil Sedaka, nicest
wow.
guy on the planet. And Debbie Harry from Blondie. Gosh, I could tell those stories
cool.
forever. She was so we just were gabbing because she grew up in the town next to mine in North Jersey. So we had great conversations, but I had an opportunity to interview to be one of Dan Rather's assistants. And he probably had about a dozen of them. And so off I go to the CBS Broadcast Center. And, the interview went really well. I wasn't interviewing with him. And I had a chance after the interview to actually sit in his chair at the CBS Evening News. So I'm sitting at this chair and I'm in awe. And I'm thinking, I'm going to be the next Dan Rather. And then I get called back for the second interview and I turn it down.
Oh, why?
I turn it down I said, I'm going to get pigeonholed into being someone's assistant. And I was realizing that I loved PR. I loved public relations. I loved the press that I was doing. I was really happy. And I said, well, maybe I don't want to be Dan Rather's assistant.
Yeah.
And then I had a chance to work on the news desk of the CBS Evening News, nights and weekends, $169 a week. Okay, we're going back in the 80s here, folks.
Yeah, I get it. I get it.
My mom and dad will help you, will support you. But I'm thinking, okay, there's no trains from New Jersey into New York City in those crazy hours.
No.
So I would have to drive my car and park in a garage. So I would spend more money than I would make. And the more that I thought about it, the more I realized how much I love public relations. And with public relations, I can also have a white picket fence lifestyle. I may not travel the whole globe and work 24/7, but I can have a career and still have a family and a home and a community and activities I like to do. And so I decided I'm going to stick with the PR route, and I have not turned back.
So let's go back, though, to you sitting at the desk. I mean, here's your moment, and dare I say it's not truly the moment, but that moment of you sitting in that spot where you want to be. I mean, I know it was, you were in awe, I get that, but how empowering was that for that brief second or moment that you said?
Oh my, it was so empowering because it was this dream that I had, or so I thought, for so many years. And then there I was sitting in that chair, all dressed in my suit, as if I was ready to broadcast the CBS Evening News. And it felt great. And it felt great. And that interview felt great. I can't remember the woman who interviewed me. I can picture what she looked like. I don't remember her name. But I felt like that was home.
Yeah. And I mean, nowadays you would have had the luxury of being able to have somebody take a picture of you behind the desk.
It's very funny. Actually, I think that there was someone that I knew that took an old-fashioned picture, because I had worked with all of these photographers when we would have guests at the CBS radio division. We had a young adult network back at the time called CBS Radio. And we did a lot of interviews, and it was my job to be on site when those people would be live on a radio show or taping a radio show, and to get pictures of the radio host with the celebrity.
Nice.
So I knew all of the internal photographers. And I think that someone actually did get a picture that's probably in a box in my attic.
As long as you have the picture, that's all that, something to memorialize it. So you decided at that point that you want the white picket fence. So how long did you work for somebody else before you decided finally that, hey, I'm going to start my own, I'm going to go out on my own now?
I went out on my own 3 years ago. So my whole career up until 3 years ago was working for others. Someone else's name was on the door. And I worked for other people for all of those years. When I left CBS, I was doing PR at small agencies throughout New Jersey and eventually remotely for an agency in Los Angeles. And I was doing all the work and someone else was getting all of the accolades.
Yeah.
So it's so interesting, though, when you look back on your career after you've had a very full career and it's not ending yet, and you think about what direction was I better off. And I think that for me, the timing was right 3 years ago for me to branch out on my own and have my own name on the door. So it's great to be able to say I have Andrea Pass Public Relations.
Oh, I'm sure. And how did the person that you were working for take it at the time that you were like, hey, I'm gone?
Well, actually, that's an interesting story because I didn't say that. She got rid of a third of the company. And what happened was I had 3 weeks of back-to-back trips to the West Coast, was sick as a dog. I asked her, could someone do the middle trip for me? And she said no. All along knowing she was going to be terminating me and most of the company, including her brother.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was the VP of media relations. And I was the one bringing in 99% of the business, and everyone knew me. So they were coming to the agency because of me, not because of the other people at the agency. And so when the situation presented itself, and it was, okay, Andrea, we've got to let you go. And I said, you're firing me? No, that's not what we're doing. We're letting you go. I said, semantics.
Yeah.
And I was so excited. And I know that's not a reaction someone has when they're terminated, but I had already been in talks with so many of my previous clients that kept saying to me, why are you working for someone else when you're doing all the work? Why aren't you out there working for yourself? And so because that door closed, it was wonderful. I was let go the day before I was going on a vacation, which of course was not very nice after 3 weeks of traveling, but regardless, ended up having a great trip touring the national parks, which was, if you haven't done it, do it. It's amazing. The beauty we have right here in our country is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And when I started my agency and got my LLC, I had my first client within a day or two, and he bought me my first set of business cards.
Nice.
Let me buy this for you. And within 2 or 3 weeks, I had a full slate of clients.
Nice.
And so it's an interesting story because I was nervous about going out on my own. And I kept saying, all right, I'll do it for Memorial Day. No, I'll do it for Labor Day. No, I'll do it around the holiday. Like I kept putting it off. And this forced me, but it was a blessing in disguise.
Sometimes that's exactly what we need, though. We need that little, dare I say, nudge out of the nest to push us to make things happen for us. And at the time, we may be devastated. We may go, oh no, what am I going to do now? But sometimes it ultimately works out for the best, as it did with you. So as a PR agent, and this is, what would you recommend for a client or a person that is looking for an agent? How should they vet an agent?
It's very interesting because most people don't understand public relations. It's very confusing. We're the misunderstood element in the marketing mix. And public relations is securing earned media coverage, not paid coverage. You can pay for an ad. You can pay for an advertorial. You can even pay to be interviewed somewhere. But that's not the public relations that I do at Andrea Pass Public Relations. I do earned media. I work with a client to get their story told, get them interviewed, secure product reviews or book reviews, and secure that press coverage so they are increasing their brand awareness, staying relevant, and ultimately driving sales. So that's what I do in a nutshell. And for someone who has not dipped their pinky toe into the public relations waters, I say this: Google yourself. Okay? Google yourself and see, is anyone talking about you besides you? Okay? Okay, you could be doing, distributing a lot of content on your website, on your social media. You could have a blog, but is someone else talking about you? Is someone else patting you on the back or touting the accolades of your business or your book or your product? Because that's what traditional public relations is all about. Now, Google your competitor or a few of your competitors. And if your competitors are getting quoted in the media, being interviewed by the media or reviewed by the media, well, then you're a step behind. So you need to add public relations to your budget to be able to make sure you're there, because it doesn't happen overnight, and public relations is not a one and done. And I've had people say to me, Andrea, how about 1 month? No. Public relations is an ongoing process, and any PR person that will take an account for 1 month is desperate and is not going to really secure any press coverage. So they're going to take your money and not service you. So one thing that I can say about myself, the entire career I've had, and even more so as the owner of Andrea Pass Public Relations, is I'm honest, I'm authentic, and I set realistic expectations.
How important do you think social media is in the public relations industry now?
Social media is where it's at. If you're not on social media, no one's talking about you. And I equate it to the old ad for Doublemint gum, they told two friends, and so on, because it is the current word of mouth marketing. And I say to my clients, number one, you need a website. You can't start public relations until you have a website so that people can go and get that background information about you, your service, your product, your book, what have you. And you need social media pages, but they have to be active pages. And they have to be pages that aren't pictures of you with a dog and pictures of a cute kid and pictures of the dinner you ate last night. They have to be pictures that are showing content of your business, tips from your business, an interesting article you read that pertains to your business, or press that you've been covered in, so that you are building that brand awareness. So social media is important, but many clients don't understand it's not about posting 6 times a day.
That's the whole caveat to that, is you have to watch how much you're putting out there of what your content is, what you've created. You can't just
Exactly. And there are so many people that get addicted, and it's very addictive. Let's be honest. I mean, today the average consumer absorbs 11 hours of content a day.
Wow.
That's a lot of content, which means that we are watching a TV show and scrolling on our phones or our tablets. And we might be reading the daily newspaper that we get in hard copy, but at the same time, we're scrolling, or we're watching TV, or we're listening to a podcast at the same time that we're scrolling. And so there's so much content to be had. Be careful that you're not muddying the waters.
The podcast that I released today, we actually talked a little bit about, because it was about stress management, and we actually talked about the stress addiction that comes with social media, that we don't even think about it. And it's true, because what you said about sitting there scrolling, my husband could never understand. He's like, how can you do that? How can you watch TV and know what's really going on and still scroll on your phone? But I could. And he's like, how do you do that? I can't do that. I'm like, I've gotten better about it, but it's one of those things where it's just you want to know what's going on. It's the, dare I say, the car accident theory. You're driving along and it's like, oh wait.
Yeah, and I think that it could benefit so many companies by effectively using using social media as part of their PR. But you have to know how you're doing it, and you have to pay attention, because if you're going to post every 20 minutes, your important message is now down at the bottom of the feed. So why would you post all the time? And then when you're commenting on someone's post, which is a great engagement, is so important. But when you're commenting and engaging, make sure you're saying something important or including another link. I was on a panel earlier today, and I noticed the person running the panel had commented on something on LinkedIn, but he didn't include information. He says, oh yes, I have a panel on that topic today. So then I went on that same LinkedIn page, put the link and the graphic for the panel, because it's one thing to say I'm having a panel, but people need to be able to register for it and see the graphic, because we are a visual society, which is why so many podcasts today are also video casts, because people like to see who's talking.
Oh, exactly. I have a friend she's my biggest fan, I would say. And she's like, is it coming up on YouTube so I can see what the person looks like? I'm like, yes. So when I launched this, I went for both, because we are a visual society. And sometimes we just want to hear the voice, but other times we want to see that person.
I think that's so important, because when I'm talking to clients and prospective clients about public relations, I explain to them, you have to be available to do interviews, and you've got to turn your camera on. And I was meeting with someone the other day who said to me, yeah, but I need to wear glasses when I'm on a computer. Now, when I go out to dinner or whatever, I don't wear glasses. I need glasses for my computer. But I think we're in a world, nobody thinks twice about somebody wearing glasses.
No.
And I say to people, when you're doing an interview, get rid of the t-shirt. You're on an interview, be present, be dressed. Oh, does that mean I have to put on makeup? Well, yeah, if you want to come across as an effective business person in whatever your category is, take the time and be present on an interview. Listen, be aware, make sure you have your message points, And then you're going to have an audience that is going to hear you and hopefully react and purchase your book or your product or your service or want to engage with you. That's the whole point of all these dialogues, is to learn.
Right. I host a panel occasionally, usually for book authors, book releases. And the first time we did it, the other people that were in there were not. Some had t-shirts on and everything else, and I'm like, and I didn't say anything. But my thinking is, you are your image, you are your persona. So when you are doing this stuff, you better look your best, or at least halfway best. Put some effort into it, because the consumer, your audience, wants to know you. They want to see what you look like. I had an opportunity to do an interview, and it was going to be a written interview, and I had done 2 podcasts. I hadn't had much sleep. I had my makeup on and everything, and I just asked them, I said, can I just record it instead? So I did, because number one, you can hear the inflection in my voice instead of just reading copy. And I think that makes a better connection than just reading copy.
And I think that if you know your story, you can't make a mistake, because it's your story or your business. And I work with authors all of the time, and I would love to be on one of your panels one of these days. We'll have to talk about that offline. And I say to my authors, you're doing an interview, say the name of the book. And so many times my clients say, my book, in my book, because once you're in the thick of a discussion, the listener or viewer may not remember the name of your book. So you need to say that over and over again, and not for it to sound funny or awkward, but no one cares what happened in chapter 3, but they want to know that book XYZ gives this kind of information or this kind of story based on fiction, nonfiction, cookbook, whatever. But I think that the way that our world has become, and the fact of the pandemic really growing video content, which I'm meeting people all over. I'm from New Jersey. You're from Chicago.
Yeah.
I have people all over the world. I'm waiting to hear about an author I might work with from New Zealand. I go to a networking group in the UK, and I have a client from Toronto. It's a pleasure, because you get to meet people. But if you don't put your screen on and you don't engage, it's almost like, there's something fishy here. Why won't that person turn on their screen? And it's not about who's skinny and who's a model or who's built, or it's not about that. It's about that we're all people. And I think we're doing public relations for ourselves by turning on the camera and engaging.
I had a gentleman I interviewed the other day. He's from Egypt. And he's a singer, but he didn't have his camera on at first. And I'm like, can we put the camera on? And he's like, sure. Cause I'm like, it's going to go on YouTube. Then he had the mic here. And so basically I'm getting the whole conversation, which is fine. I mean, that's what he wants, but like, okay. But you're selling yourself as an artist, as a musician, play that up. And he's done modeling. So it's not like he's unattractive. So play that up. But whatever he was comfortable with, I wasn't going to critique. So it was just kind of like, okay.
Yeah, I think that you have to recognize that every opportunity is an opportunity to secure another client or consumer or whatever your angle is. I mean, in my public relations firm, I have B2B and B2C clients. So it just depends. But if you're not going to take it seriously, whatever kind of an interview it might be, that you're dressed a certain way or you're holding yourself a certain way. I mean, my other pet peeve are the people that do this. Yeah. Oh my goodness, do not lean on your hand, sit up and focus.
And don't wear your necklace.
And you know what? And that you should hold dear to your heart forever. And that's a wonderful thing that you have. And I think that's a story. Now I know something about you I didn't know before. And I wouldn't have known that had we not had that little chat about your necklace. So I think but that's what brings us together, is learning something unique about the person on the other side of the screen, and taking it seriously. When I hear people say, oh, do I have to do my hair? Huh? don't you do your hair every day? Like, I don't know about you. I wake up early. I exercise every morning. I shower. I get dressed up 4 days a week. Friday's dress down day. And I put on my jewelry and my makeup and I am present. And I just don't get it because I've worked from a home office for 6 years. So I always was in the routine.
I think this is the difference, though. I mean, I was in high school in the mid 80s. I graduated in the mid 80s. So, I mean, I'm a little younger than you, but our generation, your generation, we were taught. I mean, my grandmother would not go anywhere without her lipstick. It didn't matter if she didn't have any other makeup on. Her lipstick was always important. So, I mean, and, wrinkles, she was in love with the iron. I was just kind of like, no. But I mean, I think it's a generational thing, because now it's like, well, we used to go to, if you went to the theater, you dressed up to go to the theater. Up. And now nobody dresses to go to the theater. I'm like, well, I used to like dressing to go to the theater. It was something to do. It was something important. But I think those things have changed so much that everybody's just casual now. It's not taking so much ownership of, maybe I should say this, there's two extremes. You're either taking ownership or you're not. You're photoshopping everything about you, or you don't care. There's not really this middle ground now.
Yeah, but I think that it depends on the situation. So for instance, if you're doing a podcast or an interview, then you're selling yourself because you want to portray who you are in business, so that someone will say, okay, I'm going to reach out to Andrea Pass Public Relations and schedule a call. But if you're doing a networking, I do a lot of networking, meet a lot of interesting people. But if you're going to be that person with the baseball cap over your eyes, laying on your hand, eating your food with your mouth opened, I'm never going to do business with you. That to me, you are, and if you walk away when it's my turn to introduce myself, oh my goodness, forget the rap of Andrea. Because if I listen to your pitch, why aren't you listening to my pitch? So it's a very different world that we're in now. And I think that in the whole approach of better too, I think we are better off with this communication, to be able to have a call with somebody. And I had someone, they made the call with me, like a new business call, and they didn't want to put their camera on. And I said, well, it's a little awkward because you know what I look like, and I don't know what you look like. And of course, you can't tell from someone's LinkedIn picture. I mean, they're tiny. And the person put it on and said, well, this is what I look like, but I don't really want to keep the camera on. And I realized, you know what? I don't think I could work with that person.
Right.
Because I'm not going to be able to secure press coverage for a person who doesn't want to be present.
Well, and that's my point with the author roundtable. It's like, ladies, you're representing your books. People want to see you. They don't want to see, you just rolling out of bed like, hey. No, we have to be professional here. This is, if you got asked to be, and I didn't say this, but it's like, if you got asked to be on The View or Kelly and Ryan, are you going to roll in there looking, in your sweatpants? And even if it's just on a video call, are you going to look professional? Or are you going to look a hot mess?
Yeah. And I think, certainly for authors, many authors are not famous. Okay. The number of authors that are making money as an author, it's a small group. So if you're a first-time author or even a second-time author, you want to create that following. And certainly what you do in your roundtable, what I do in public relations, creates a following and creates that, okay, this is what's happening with this book, or here's a story about this author. And you may not have known, about this author. And I think that by telling your stories and engaging and being present on the video screen helps to grow book awareness as well. Listen, authors are entrepreneurs. And when I say that to authors, so many authors say, I never thought of it that way. Like, well, you are. You're an entrepreneur because you are an author. And whether it's fiction, nonfiction, whatever, children's books, cookbooks, that's your part of your business. And that's your persona. And that's your brand. And it's very interesting because I have a client, an author of mine, who was doing an interview. And she said, oh, I don't really have a brand. And I'm listening back to this interview. And I called her afterwards. I said, you are your brand. and I don't know about you, I follow certain authors. And when they have a new book, I cannot wait to get their new book because I really like their stories, their writing style. I'm engaged. So why wouldn't you want to grow that by being present? And you do have a brand and getting the message about your brand to different audiences that you may not have thought about. And not every audience is Kelly and Ryan. There are so many, I look at the things that I watch and I absorb. And when it comes to books, I mean, I'm a big fan of Friends in Fiction on Facebook, and I go to their Wednesday night talks and when I can. And you learn so much, and I'm engaging with all of these things I didn't engage with before. But I also make sure that I'm commenting about my clients who are authors. So it's just an important part of our communication today. It is to be present. And listen, we all have a bad hair day. Okay, that's life.
Yeah, but I mean, just try to own yourself. If you're trying to put yourself out there, try to own yourself. Whether I admit it, when I first released my first book, I called it the Better to Burnout series. So when I released my second book, I ended up putting that as a Better to Burnout novel. And I did not intentionally decide this was going to be the Better To podcast. That happened by accident. But then I realized at a certain point after I started doing this, you've created a brand. You have a brand, the Better To brand. I'm like, all right, not that that's, a little niche, because there's a lot of people that could pick up on that, but it was just something that it all fell into place.
And the fact that you own that you are the Better To brand, that's important. And I think that you look at that, and how many of us, hearing my story, would I have been better off being a desk assistant for, or an assistant for Dan Rather, or having the life that I have now? I think I'm really better off having the life that I have now, married for 33 years. I have 2 adult children that are very happy and doing well, live around the block from my mom and dad, get to see my friends, do my volunteerism, go on vacation. Like, I would not do anything different, but I think other people might have said which path that they took to get to where they are today. And had I not taken the path to first leave a toxic environment in public relations many, many years ago, where I worked 24, 6.5, basically, and missed every occasion. I love my clients. They love me. I did great work, but the person whose name was on the door was a bully. And then when I went to another firm, and lovely people, lovely, lovely people, but she had to let everybody go. And that was her call. We're still in touch. She's a very nice person. But starting Andrea Pass Public Relations is my Better To, because I'm not retiring anytime soon. I'm good at what I do. I get results. I communicate effectively, but I also don't work 24/7. And that's important to me, that I have a life. I mean, tonight, after you and I talk, we're actually seeing friends that are in New York from Arizona that we haven't seen in 3 years.
Nice.
So we're really excited, and I can pick up and go. And if I need to talk to my clients, I have my cell phone with me, but I can go have an evening out with some friends and not have to work 24/7 because of the business I created and the way I created my PR firm.
Well, and let's step back from PR. If you would have pursued the Dan Rather thing, okay. Firstly, let's be honest here. There was that glass ceiling for women. I mean, how long before we actually had a woman behind that anchor desk? It wasn't until the late 90s, early 2000s. Yep. So you would have had that to overcome that. But not only that, if you would have got a job as a reporter, then you would have been on call going, oh wow, travel's great. But do you really want to have to go to war-torn countries? Do you really want to have to see all that? So when you look at what your dream was, as stepping back as an older person, do you see that might have been, it would have changed who you are at your core?
100%. And I think that deciding to not pursue that kind of journalistic broadcast journalism career and go in a different route. And it's okay. It's quite all right, because not every young person who goes off to college or comes out of college understands and knows. You have to be in the shoes to realize what matters to you. And I think the way that we're taught is a certain way that we should be, all this gusto, and we should be going for this, position where everyone will know your name and you'll travel the globe. And in my career, I've traveled a lot domestically. I've traveled with clients. I've been at conventions or at, trade shows or media tours and operating on no sleep. And I'm glad I had that experience. My kids were older, so I was able to do that and be away at a week here, a week there, whatever. But I don't miss it. I don't miss all that travel because I've done it and I don't have to do it now. And I can secure coverage for my clients from the comfort of my desk. So yeah, it's really interesting. I just read this book, The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I don't know if you've read it yet.
No.
But it's a fiction book, and you should probably pick that up. It's very interesting because it talks about this woman, and it's basically if she did this course in her life, this would have happened. And it's very like Scrooge meets the time traveler's wife. That's how I call it. But my book club, we ended up having this discussion. Would you have changed things? And so many people were saying, oh, I would have changed this. And I said, I wouldn't change a thing because then I wouldn't have had my children. And for me, or anyone who is a parent, and not everybody is a parent, but for me, that's the most important thing in the whole wide world. And so that's going to supersede my public relations career or travel or anything. It is the fact that if I made a change and I hadn't met my husband, then I wouldn't have had those two children.
Oh, exactly. And I mean, I have a really, speaking of paths, my husband and I, we worked down the street from each other, but we didn't know each other. We went to restaurants, didn't see each other. Then I took a class and this teacher's like, you need to take my other class because I need you to meet somebody. Okay. So I meet this other person finally after the teacher would not let up. And she had ended up dating my husband at one point and they were still friends. So when my husband and I actually started, when I hung out with him and stuff, it wasn't anything big. And then I went to go house hunting and I happened to pick a house that was across the street from his brother's. So he's like, I want to go see this. I'm like, okay. So we started talking. Long story short, my old landlord was his boss at Wendy's. We both had the same high school colors, even though I was in Shreveport and he was up here. We both worked at Chuck E. Cheese at one point in our life. We both worked at Kmart. I mean, it was we didn't know each other because we were at two different locations, but still to have that commonality and then to be right down the street from each other. So it was like dare I say, the universe kind of said, here, we're going to push you back together. You were supposed to be here. So sometimes even if you divert off your path, you can still end up there. And I will say, yeah, that was what started the Better 2 podcast, was because I told him, he was sick at the time when we first got together. And he's like, I'm not going to be around. I'm like, look, it's better to love you than lose you. And I can honestly say I had him for 16, 17 years and I will stick with it was better too.
Yeah. And I think that you look at those and there was actually a musical on Broadway a number of years ago with Idina Menzel called If Then. And we saw this because I wanted to see Idina Menzel in person. It was probably one of the worst musicals, but it was this on the stage was split in half and she's going from this side to this side. What would have happened in her life if she didn't go to the park that day?
Cool concept.
And if she met this guy at the park versus the guy she had been with. And it was a very interesting concept. The show did not last very, very long, but I think that we look at that and even I look at people who have reached out to me over the years for PR, but chose not to invest in public relations. And I go Googling them now, they're nowhere to be found. So how is your product or service getting out there if you didn't do any PR? Like you didn't have to hire me, but you could have hired someone. And
True.
So it's very interesting how people take different directions and or something comes full circle. I mean, my son left a job to go to another job, and then he ended up back at the same first company. My daughter, the same thing. And that happened to me. I left a PR firm because I couldn't commute anymore and I found something closer to home. And then we bought a house. So I went back to the first PR firm, so you just never know what direction and what's going to present itself to you and who you're going to meet. And I think that we all have to be open-minded. Now, I guess we don't all have to be open-minded, but I like to be open-minded because I just never know. And I've met such wonderful people through the pandemic and really developed such great relationships. And I look forward to the future. And I look forward when I do travel for something to be able to say, oh, I'm at the Houseware show in Chicago. Donna, come meet me. Let's go for deep dish. And,
Nice.
So it's that sort of a thing. And the other thing is when I meet people, I'm from a town called Fair Lawn, New Jersey. Okay, North Jersey, 20 minutes from the George Washington Bridge. So very close to New York City. And I'm meeting people from all over the country that say, oh, do you know so-and-so from Fair Lawn? I'm like, yeah.
Wow.
I was on the phone with a woman from San Francisco, and her husband, who had passed a few years ago, graduated high school with a girlfriend of mine. And I told my girlfriend, do you know this name? Yeah, blah, blah, blah. And just the other day, a woman I was talking to, oh, my ex-husband is so-and-so. I'm like, I know that name. So it's so funny how you meet people on a screen and you learn a lot. So I think we're better off. We are better to have met through these crazy times. And I think that it's going to stay. There's going to be this hybrid of in-person and virtual communications. And I think that, for me personally, I love that. And for me professionally, as a publicist, I love that.
Well, it opens up so much for us. I mean, I interviewed somebody that was in Japan. I've interviewed people from Australia. And I get to do it in the comfort of my house. I don't have to jet all the way over there, which would be nice to, don't get me wrong, but it opens up so much. And then I get to share these stories that people are willing to give me with other people. And so it just keeps growing and developing. And hopefully, like the stress podcast, somebody gets something from that. Somebody who wants to be an inventor, learn something from Warren. I mean, there's so much diversity out there and so many different stories that can enrich our lives. I mean, really, that's why I do this.
No, I think that it's wonderful, and I love the whole topic, and I'm so excited to talk to you today because I'm so happy that I took that direction to do PR and eventually start Andrea Pass Public Relations, and I'm happy. And I hope that most of the people that speak to you are happy about the decisions that they made.
I would say almost everyone I've talked to, they are happy with the decision they've made. And I mean, I've dealt with some really, really rough topics. I mean, I've had a gentleman who's battling alcoholism. So, I mean, for him to come on and be vulnerable and share, that's empowering for him. But it's also reaching out to somebody else who may have gone through something similar. And it gives the family member some understanding. So,
because no one knows what's going on in our personal lives unless we choose to share it.
That is a big thing that I've come to realize in the last couple of weeks because, it's coming up on the year for me, for my husband passing. And I've had podcasts to do and I'm sitting there and I'm all smiles and then I would turn it off and I'm dealing with the sadness. But we all anybody in the entertainment industry, anybody in media knows that. You put on a face, you put on your mask, you get to do your job, and then afterwards you get to be vulnerable.
And it's just reality. I was running a charity, a comedy night, virtual comedy night, and it happened to be that my daughter was rushed to the hospital that week, and I had no sleep, and she has an autoimmune disease, and it was just, having her taken out by the EMS workers in like hazmat suits. Oh. And we're like, she doesn't have COVID. She has an autoimmune disease, but watching this and not being able to go with her, and her husband couldn't go with her to the hospital, but I had operated on no sleep. And I wasn't sharing this information with anybody.
Right.
And then that night, I'm doing this comedy night and I'm smiling and I have 100 whatever computers and we're raising money for this charity. And then I guess a few days later, I was talking to someone. I told them what was going on. They said, you knew all of this and you did that?
Yeah.
You were smiling. I said, well, yeah, what was I going to do?
Mm-hmm.
It was my event. I was running the event, for those 2 hours. I picked myself up, dust myself off, and I did what I had to do. And I think that you've recognized that you have to do, and you were so lucky to have shared those years.
Oh yeah.
And that was the right decision. And no one can take that away from you. And I think that in everything that we're doing in this world, it's, you have to think that we're better by doing something.
Definitely. I will say this, and because you're in public relations, I have to say this. I write about the music industry, but the reason why I'm saying this is I've seen fans of bands, and they're like, "Well, the band would never be dishonest. They wouldn't hide things from the fans." And I'm just like, really, really, you actually believe? And it's true. They don't see that wall between personal and professional.
Right. But I have to say, just talking about music, when I did work for the CBS radio division doing public relations, I did get to go to the second Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction at the
Nice.
Waldorf in New York City. I was working the press room. And I had just gotten married a few months before, and I still recall my royal blue strapless cocktail dress with sparkles all over it. And I am a huge Billy Joel fan.
Okay.
Huge. Okay, huge. And so I'm in the press room, and Julian Lennon is there, and I can't even remember all the other people, and I'm making sure the camera's here to get pictures, and I'm writing down who was there so I could do a press release afterwards. And a girlfriend walks in, hands me a piece of paper. To Andrea, love Billy Joel. Scrabble
Wow.
paper. And I'm like, oh my goodness. I'm like, where is he? So she points to where his table is. And there I go with this old-fashioned 110 camera to his table. He was married to Christy Brinkley at the time. And of course, she's more stunning in person than you could ever imagine.
Yeah.
But I put my head between the two of them at their table and say, hi, Billy. Sorry to interrupt. My name is Andrea. I've been a fan for a long time, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for your music. Now, he could have been really angry.
Yeah.
I was interrupting. He wipes his mouth with his napkin, puts it down, grabs my hand in both of his hands, holds my hand and says, Andrea, thank you so much for coming over. I really appreciate that. That was the end of the conversation. He took out 2 seconds
Mm-hmm.
to give me a memory that has lasted me a lifetime. So when you meet those, and then my flip side story is when I was at CBS, one of the celebrities that came to be interviewed was Eddie Money. And Eddie Money had this very big ego. He thought he was a bigger performer than he was. And the producer of the show had all of these different sodas. Back in those days, you would have food and snack in the recording room. Now you would never have that. You don't want to spill anything on any recording equipment. He wanted the one kind of soda that wasn't there. So the producer has to go out. I'm not going out. I'm there with the camera person for pictures. I'm doing PR. I'm not an errand girl. So the producer has to go, comes back. And then 2 seconds later, Eddie Money says to the producer, oh, I need a pack of cigarettes. Because you were allowed to smoke in studio.
Yeah.
So we still haven't recorded the interview yet. And now the producer has to leave to buy cigarettes. And he did whatever he could just to show that he can do that. And from that point on, anytime an Eddie Money song ever came on the radio, even to today, turned it off. So, some musicians and celebrities can be very nice to you and very friendly, and others could be just jerks.
When I was 17, I went with some friends to go see the Power Station, and we were at the hotel and stuff. It was in New Orleans, and they were in a bar sitting there, and there were fans like crazy screaming. And I decided that I was over it. So I went across the street to wait for my friends, and I'm looking at this chain link fence. And the security guard screams out, they're people, not animals. Looking at a chain link fence, that gave me all the clarity I needed of fame and celebrity. It's like they're people. And I went back and got my friends, and we didn't end up meeting them. But it was a very profound moment for me. Because it's like, I have met other celebrities since then, but it was very profound because it made me realize that they don't want you to scream, which I never did. They don't want you to touch them. Just be a person to them. That's all they have. That's all they ask.
Yeah. And certainly, as a public relations person, I've been, in studio with celebrities. And with my clients that might be smaller level celebrities, but being in those environments, and when you're in a green room at the Today Show, well, I belong in the green room the same as you, Mr. or Mrs. Celebrity.
Mm-hmm.
So they should be as nice to me. And the only time I went for my phone to get a picture, and I brought my assistant with me, me and my assistant were big New York Yankee fans, huge Yankee fans.
Okay.
And into the green room, because we were with our client, walks Jorge Posada, who was the catcher for the Yankees for many, many years. Fabulous catcher. Now, of course, unless you're a Yankee fan, you're not going to have a clue who this person is. And he walks in and my face drops and I look at my assistant. She's across the room and she does a double take. So I know she realizes. And I go to grab my phone. And the security person said, no phones. And I was like, okay. So I decide to wait by the makeup area because he was going to have to go by there. And I said, hi, Jorge, I'm Andrea. I'm a huge Yankee fan. And he did the same thing. He said, hey, Andrea, thanks for saying so. Or something. Simplest little thing, but he recognized I belonged there. And then about a few months later, Bernadette Peters was there. And I'm a big Broadway fan. And I said, hey, Bernadette, how are you? And her handlers blocked her and she stuck up her nose at me. I'm in the same green room that you are. I am supposed to be here the same way you're supposed to be here. And from that point, I will never see a Broadway show with Bernadette Peters. So you have these interesting stories of who you meet, but sometimes, celebrities are wonderful and sweet, and other times they have a big ego. But I think that in my world, in public relations, I'm going to see both of that. Yeah. And, but I'm glad that I have the positive stories to share, and my clients have had those positive. I had a client one time, we were doing a morning show in New York, and Joan Rivers, the late Joan Rivers, was there that day. And I was taking pictures of my client with Joan Rivers, and Joan says, what do you mean, honey? You need to be in the picture. Someone take the phone. Someone else take the picture. She's got to be. And she was so nice to me. And she says, I bet you never get in the pictures. And I said, you're right. I'm the PR gal. I'm behind the scenes. And for someone of her stature to say, you are important. And I'm used to the fact that in PR that I don't get the recognition. My clients get the recognition. That's why they hire me, to get them the recognition. But when someone turns around and acknowledges you, whether that's one-on-one verbally, with a LinkedIn review, with an email, it feels really good to know that you made the right course in life and you're glad that you did what you did. And for me, I'm glad that led me to Andrea Pass Public Relations. So I'm a happy camper.
So let me ask you this, because we're going to wrap this up shortly. Are you taking any new clients?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. I do have room for 2 new clients, and things come and things go, so you never know timing. So, feel free to reach out to me at AndreaPassPR.com, and I do have an appointments tab, and I will certainly speak with you and do a half-hour consultation about public relations and what I could do for you, your service, your product, your book, to begin getting the word out there and increasing brand awareness using PR.
Thanks, guys, for tuning in to the Better 2 podcast. Your listenership is greatly appreciated. If you like what you hear, remember to hit subscribe. We also have our videos on YouTube. They're usually posted the same day as the podcast, and you should check it out. If you have a question or you would like to be a guest on the show, please drop me an email, and I'll be glad to talk to you about it. The email is Donna, D-A-U-N-A, at thebetter2podcast.com. Thanks again for tuning in, and catch you next time.